Wouldn't it have been nice not to have to pick out clothes for school and worry about if you look good enough or not? There are many different views involving school uniforms, but the cons are very beneficial. Many schools are already enforcing school uniforms and have seen positive results. High schools should make uniforms mandatory. For one, bullying would decrease if uniforms were mandatory. Two, inappropriate clothing would not be worn to school. Three, uniforms would put less stress on the kids. And four, violence would decrease if uniforms were mandatory. Uniforms could provide a safety net for the kids who are usually being picked on. The first thing that would change is bullying. In my experience, most people analyze what others are wearing and how their clothes compare. In schools, the kids that aren't wearing the cool clothing or have the cool makeup or hairstyles are being bullied for what they look like. I'm sure that many of you agree. According to the article by Anne Bodine, a college student, uniforms would level the playing fields for the kids. Uniforms would also eliminate class distinctions in high school, placing the poor on equal footing with the rich. The poor would not be judged by the not cool clothing that they were wearing, and the rich wouldn't also be judged by the cool clothing they were wearing. It would just create equalness throughout the school. Besides bullying, another thing that would change would be inappropriate clothing would never be worn to school. Amy Wilson, a student at Brigham Young University, said it would regulate the obscenity of clothing. It would prevent obscene clothing, as dubbed by school officials, from being worn to school. Sexual and drug-related clothing would not be allowed in the school because they would be wearing school uniforms. In my high school, Britton Heckle High School in Britton, South Dakota, there was an issue of sending kids home for what they were wearing. If it was holes in their pants, in their shirts, or vulgar messages or pictures on their shirts. It took time out of educational things and made the kids go home, and then it took them a while, and then they had to come back. Along with inappropriate clothing decreasing, stress on the kids would also be decreasing. Uniforms would put less stress on the kids. Changing outfits every morning to find that right outfit for school is so stressful. Society is always worried about image. It would also allow parents to buy much fewer clothing choices for the kids. They would be wearing uniforms all week and then their normal clothes on the weekends, creating less of a budget for the parents. In the article, School Uniforms, a qualitative analysis of aims and accomplishments at 2 Christian schools, 3 college authors said uniforms decreased the competition in schools. Poor kids looked less underprivileged. Less stress means happier kids, and happier kids means less violence. Violence would also decrease if uniforms were mandatory. Amy Wilson, a Brigham Young University student, wrote an article in 1998 saying that violence could be controlled with uniforms. Gang-related clothing is often worn to school, such as bandanas or shirts that indicate you're in that gang. If uniforms were mandatory, these clothing options would not be able to be worn to school, decreasing violence. It is also apparent from baggy clothing that many weapons could be hid inside of the clothing. A tighter, more fitted uniform would decrease the option of kids hiding any kind of weapon in their clothing. Although many people are against school uniforms, the pros outweigh the cons, and high schools should make uniforms mandatory. Maybe some of you one day could be on a school board, helping a school make the smart decision to have the children wearing school uniforms. For one, bullying would decrease if uniforms were mandatory. 2, inappropriate clothing would never be worn to school. 3, uniforms would put less stress on the kids. And lastly, violence would decrease if uniforms were mandatory. High school uniforms should be made mandatory.
Hmm?